What if you could rise from the ashes of pain and rewrite your life on your own terms, unapologetically? Welcome back to Happiness on Tap. I'm your host, Leann Herron, and today I am joined by the unstoppable Susan Ball, life redesign specialist, author of the brand new book, Enough, A Woman's Rebellion Against Healing, Narcs, and Labels. Susan knows exactly what it takes to break free from toxic relationships, suffocating family dynamics, and soul crushing codependency. Her work is all about helping women reclaim their power, rebuild radical self trust, and create lives fueled by joy and authentic freedom. Let's welcome Susan to the show. Susan, it is so wonderful to have you join me today.
Hi, I'm so happy to be here. This is awesome.
Great. I'm excited for this conversation. So, if you are ready to ditch the rules, claim your voice, and step into your own revolution, this episode is a cannot miss. So, let's get started. Susan, let's start with your journey. What led you to become a life redesign specialist?
Well, I survived or thrived after a very abusive relationship with someone who tried to take my life. And I was fortunate to meet someone who um, helped me get through that, helped me realize that living in my dark basement at the end of the laneway of, I don't know where I was living. I was just in a very dark space. And she started to bring me out of it by telling me that I had to start writing a new story, that this was not my identity, this was not my story, this was not my final chapter, that I had to start doing something different. I thought she was absolutely crazy, that she was just annoying more than anything. And she gave me tools and resources to start reframing the way I was looking at my life, the way I was looking at what had happened to me, and the way that I was absorbing that and bringing it inside. Not only was I bringing it inside, I was looking for someone to fix it, to fix it for me, to make me feel better, to give me something that would, I don't know, jumpstart my feelings again, make me feel like I was worthy of love and all of this kind of stuff. By the way, I was always worthy of love. Was my learning ultimately. But she was genuinely a good friend who helped me, and she gave me some tools to do that, and she encouraged me to step outside and start to look at the world in different ways, to look at the small things in life. And I remember doing this. I lived at the time in the city of Toronto, which is a big booming metropolis of 10 million souls. And in that city, there's all the skyscrapers, and then of course there's older buildings that have survived. And she said to me one day, I want you to go outside. I want you to look up, not down to the ground. I want you to look up, and I want you to look for all the gargoyles that are in Toronto. I said, Toronto doesn't have gargoyles. She said, no, I just want you to do that and see if it sparks joy. And I was like, this is the stupidest assignment I have ever had in my life. I'm hurting. I'm no good. I'm all of these things. And I went out and I went for a walk and I started to look up. And sure enough, I found a building with gargoyles on it. I was like, wow, I didn't even know this building existed. And lo and behold, what I noticed at the time was I actually smiled for no reason whatsoever, except that the discovery brought me joy. And I started to realize that what she was saying was there was possibilities out there, because she kept repeating to me, Susan, imagine the possibilities, imagine the possibilities. Imagine what's out there for you. Except that I didn't want to believe that, because I wanted to be harmed and hurt and all of that, which I was harmed and hurt. So I learned from that, and then I started working with other women doing the same thing, finding those things that make us smile, that make us feel just joy. Not being happy 100% of the time, but just that moment in time where you see something and you go, oh. Like for me, daisies, seeing the daisies spring up in the springtime is one of the moments where I could just drive or walk along the road and it just brings me pure, unfiltered joy. They're just such happy little flowers twinkling in the sun. So that's how I got into this, that you are not, yes, something horrible happened to you, but that's not who you are. That's not who you are at all. It is representative of a chapter in your life, not necessarily a really nice one, but it's not who you are. So there's a period of time where reflection and acceptance of what happened to you, which is an odd word, I know, but in order to move, it's like the final stage of grief. The final stage of grief is acceptance, the knowledge that this person is gone or your favorite pet is gone, and you accept that, and then you have room again for other emotions to come in. You accept that this happened. There's an acceptance that happens where I had to accept this happened to me. This is not who I am. This is not who I am. And I don't have to carry it like Marley's ghost and his chains all behind me. I don't have to carry it for the rest of my life. I get to design something that I really like, something so safe and so amazing that somebody like him can't get back in. There's just no room to get in there. There's no openings to get in there. So that's how I got into being a life redesign specialist.
Thank you so much for sharing that. I really, of course, resonated with what you were saying, about hitting that point of acceptance, because that really is something you have to do. You have to do. You have to do the work to acknowledge what you've been through, acknowledge what has happened, and to be able to move forward. Like, but you can't
Mhm.
stay stuck in ruminating in that sadness, in that misery, in that hurt. And I love how she gave you that assignment, which I could understand would have been like, oh my God, really? I'm not going to go outside. But that's one of the things that I like to tell people to do is go outside and find all the things that are yellow. Take a picture. If it brings you joy, take a picture with your cell phone. And then when you need that moment of joy, it's at your fingertips, even if you can't seem to get off the couch.
Mhm.
And sometimes we have those days where it's just a little too heavy to get up and go. But I can look at a piece of art on my walls and get the same level of joy. Or I can pull out my phone and I can look at a picture of my grandson being silly and goofy and get that joy back for that moment. And so I like the assignment. I think it's great. And it also shows you how much we miss that's going on in the world, because we're walking around like Eeyore with this dark, heavy cloud above us. So, parting the clouds and seeing the blue sky and looking up and seeing a bird or a butterfly or, even an airplane, and thinking about a wonderful trip you took,
Mm.
can be so empowering. And when you can't see those possibilities, those are the things that help you start to see those possibilities.
Yes.
And so I want to, thank you for sharing that and sharing the journey, even the ones that seem silly, but how it impacted you, um, to get you here. So, what were some of the most difficult patterns that you had to unlearn in your own healing process?
I had to unlearn. I had to unlearn what I believed love to be. And we throw around words like love and honesty and um, there's a few other big words without knowing what they mean to us. Oh, success is another one. Without knowing what they mean to us personally. They're such big words. And we think that when we throw them out there, everybody understands what we mean by that, which is not true, because my idea of success is probably 100 miles away from your idea of success. It doesn't have one definition. Love is the same thing. And we get caught up in love or what we believe to be love, and we follow that pattern. So my father was my mother and father got divorced when I was 8. And my father was always a cheater, always a womanizer, all of those kinds of things. When they divorced, of course, women, he was free to do whatever he wanted. And women were up here, and this little girl, his daughter, was, kind of an afterthought. And I didn't see him very often. So I kind of learned that it was okay to hurt someone or cause pain. It was love. Because he would say, I love you, doll. I love you, doll. So I believe that that was love. That that was love. So when I got mixed up with men who were not very nice or who would ignore me and then get on the phone and tell me, well, I love you, Susan. I love you. It was normal. Dad said it. Dad stood me up. Johnny stood me up. Love. That was love. It wasn't until I went through my healing journey that I recognized that my definition of love was really tainted, not good, and didn't serve me. That was the biggest thing. Selfish me had to recognize what love was to me now. So I had to get selfish and say to myself, well, when your dad stood you up, and we had a great relationship at the end. We fought it out, we battled it out. Like I really actually went to beat him up with my fists when I was 17. I was so angry with him. And we ended up having a really great relationship. But that period between 8 and 17 was really a difficult time for a young teenage girl to be stood up by her father. So I sat down and I said to myself, how did you feel when your father stood you up? What was going on? It wasn't an oh well moment, Leann. I was giving it that kind of overriding stupid feeling, but it wasn't an oh well moment. I was devastated. I was angry. I was hurt. I was disappointed. I was crying. I wasn't happy. There was no happy. There was none of that kind of stuff. And then I thought to myself, why are you accepting this from men? How does that feel kind and compassionate and loving for a guy to do that to you? That's unacceptable. And it went into my one side of my list of 5 things you don't want anymore in your life. To be stood up and call that love. There was nobody going to make an excuse to me and say, but I love you. It was just an accident. I didn't mean to. I forgot. No, that was all BS. That was out the window. So learning to recognize that I had to redefine love, like a lot of us had to redefine success as we grow up, on my terms and make it work for me in a very selfish way. It had to be my way or the highway, period. End of story.
Love
I
it.
hope that made sense.
Absolutely. Because of course, like it always happens, my level of resignation is very similar in life story. My parents divorced when I was in the 5th grade. And, both my parents were cheaters on each other, but I was left with my mother, who was an abuser, while my father went
Oh,
off and went through multiple women and now had a new girlfriend and a new child to do things with. And, feeling very abandoned and ignored and hurt. And it's funny because the word betrayal only came to me within probably the last 2 years. I had always called it abandonment.
mhm.
Um, and I guess it's very similar in nature, but for me as a young child, there was hurt. And but that's too, just like you, that's what I thought love was. That's what I thought marriage was, the only difference was that when I was raised to be a wife and a mother, I was raised by a traditional Hispanic family, which said, you don't leave. You always stay. Divorce was wrong. I also, from, Catholic religion, divorce is wrong. You stay. I watched what happened when my parents divorced in the Catholic religion and how that impacted. our family and us as children was brutal. And so, yeah, I had a very skewed thought and reality of what love was. And those patterns repeated and repeated and repeated until I got out of a 20-year abusive marriage and spent 3 years learning to love myself first
Mhm.
and learning and doing the time to say, this is like you. These are the 5 things. I think my list was longer than 5, but these are the things I will not accept in my future. These are the things I want in a partner when I'm ready for a partner. But right now, I need to work on finding love for myself because I didn't even know what that was. And so,
Yes.
yeah, I can very much relate.
Yeah. And I don't hold any I guess in my healing, I don't hold any animosity towards my father. It's who he was. He was a prisoner of war in World War II. He had a lot of probably PTSD because they didn't call it that. They called it shell shock or something.
Mm-hmm.
But, and my mother, you know, she was, she was different. She was, but in the end, I learned that they were humans too. I'm a human. And as humans, we need to define what we want and what we don't want in our lives. And we have to go after that. That's that's what we have to do. And as humans, we make mistakes. All of us make mistakes. But there's a difference, of course, between mistakes and abuse. No, there's no, those two don't mesh. I'm not even saying that. But I'm finding now there's a lot of intolerance towards human mistakes, human behavior in a sense. That if you're not doing things in a certain way, if you're not behaving in a certain way, well, we all know which title you get nowadays. You get called a narc, and everybody leaves you behind. You're just a narcissist. I'm hearing that word so much. Honestly, if I never heard it again, I'd be really happy. But that intolerance doesn't help us see ourselves as human and in all our flawed glory. There is no perfection. We can't get to this place of perfectly healed, perfectly happy, perfectly all of this. It's impossible. There is no that destination does not exist. I can't say that any clearer. I started to believe that that was a destination that I needed to get to until time went on and I realized that that place doesn't exist. I'm human. I'm going to screw up. I'm going to hurt people, not on purpose. Sometimes I'm just not aware. I'm not as aware as I could be or should be. Then I'm going to hurt someone. Or maybe I'm tired, or maybe something is going on. Maybe it's just not the right time. But allowing ourselves grace to make mistakes for ourselves is the greatest healing that you're going to do, is just looking at yourself and saying, well, yeah, oh boy, I really screwed up there. And I need to go and apologize, or I need to go and make amends, or I need to do that. Courage and grace is what I call it. Grace for yourself to say, look at me, I'm Susan Bone. I'm a mistake. I made a mistake. It was not, not a good moment in my day. We all make mistakes, and there's very little tolerance for that anymore, I'm finding. This sort of, and then to be courageous enough to be self um, aware and go and apologize. Then it's up to the other person. If they don't want to accept your apology or forgive you, then that's not on you. But what I'm getting at is the grace to know you made a mistake and it's okay, and that you can go and courageously apologize and make amends. That's missing.
Yeah, I agree. There is definitely a lack of tolerance for the human condition that we are. And I'm like you. I I probably am not as educated or as aware or up to date in the new lingo or the new everything that's changing. Um, and I'm not saying, well, I will never know these things. I'm just saying that this is who I am and the thoughts and the beliefs and the identity and all those things that I grew up with. And so it's going to take me a little while to shift and accept and acknowledge all the change. But in the meantime, yes, I'm going to give myself grace. And if I offend somebody by not using the correct pronoun, that was never something you and I grew up with, or pronouns other than in the English dictionary, like understanding what a pronoun was. Um,
Yeah.
and so, I will definitely apologize if I offend anyone, but if they're not either going to accept it or if they're going to continue to attack me for my lack of knowledge or whatever, then I'm done with that conversation. But I have given myself grace in knowing um, that this is who I am, and I'm still growing and I'm still learning, and I can still grow in knowledge and education and understanding.
Exactly.
So that's, that's where I am, and I'm okay with that.
I agree with you. I have a cousin. We grew up together. And this is just an example of how hurt she was. Not by what she has a daughter who is now her son. He is trans. And she called me one day crying and she said, I don't understand. I had a daughter for 30 years before this. And in the last year, I have used her quote unquote dead name or the wrong pronoun. And she turns on me so angrily. He turns on me. And she said, I I asked him, can you just be a little bit like give me a little bit of compassion as well? I know it's about you. You've made a transition and that's great. I applaud you. Yay. But I'm also human. And so far there hasn't been any acknowledgement of the fact that I might make mistakes. I'm not doing it on purpose. I'm not sitting here, you know, saying it on purpose all day long. I get it right 95% of the time right now. And I said to her, you just got to keep giving yourself grace and the courage to say, oh, I did it again. I did it again. You, the name that he has now. And just keep repeating that. And it will eventually, it will just become common practice for you. But give yourself the grace to say, I'm going to screw up, and don't punish yourself and don't feel guilt and shame. You're not doing anything wrong. This is all new to you. It's like when a baby learns to walk and they fall down, they don't stop because they fell and they feel ashamed that they couldn't do it. They keep going. So keep going and you will get it, but
Yep.
give yourself some grace.
Thank you for sharing that story, because that is exactly what I was kind of leading to, is that there's so many changes that are happening in a world um, that's so different, and I have no problems with change. I welcome change. I accept change. I support change. But give me grace. It's going to take me a minute to
Yeah,
reprogram
like,
my way of thinking that wasn't even
sorry.
necessarily my beliefs. They're beliefs that I inherited, or yeah, whatever the case may be. Just give me grace as well during this time.
It goes both ways, and we're losing that right now in society in a lot of ways, and that's sad. But what are you gonna do? Give yourself grace, ladies. If you make a mistake, you made a mistake. You're human.
You talk about starting from experience instead of starting over. Can you explain that distinction?
Well, if you've been in an abusive or toxic relationship or had a high conflict divorce or tragedy, in your life. That's an experience. You experienced all of that. That experience imprints on you and it teaches you things. Now, maybe in the moment, you're not seeing any kind of lessons. You're just feeling sad or angry or lost or frustrated or any of those things. But if you sit back and you ask yourself, so what was that experience all about? Not what was the lesson I learned or what was that experience all about? So I experienced this situation. I thought it was going to be entirely different. I thought I was going to have a white picket fence and 4 kids and a happily ever after and retirement and cruise ships. And now I'm sitting here alone in a basement in a furnace room. That's where I was. And I'm lost. But that experience happened to me. And out of that experience, I'm going to make some changes in my life so I don't experience that again that way. So I'm not a fan of what was the lesson learned. I'm more a fan of how can I change that experience so it brings me joy and brings me happiness and is something I want to nurture for the rest of my life. How can I change that experience? So for me, when I looked at the experience of the relationship that I had, part of that experience that I wanted to change was not listening to my gut. Now, that was hard to admit. That was really hard to admit. It wasn't a lesson learned. It was many, many times that I was with this person where my gut was saying, this doesn't sound proper. This is not good the way he's treating me. This is all sketchy. I think this guy's a liar. Well, like, and I'm being a little bit facetious, but that's essentially what it came down to. So the experience for me was I started from that experience and I said, okay, the next time I meet someone and my gut says, ooh, that doesn't feel right. That sounds like a lie. That sounds like something a little bit sketchy. I'm going to listen to that and I'm going to do one of two things. I'm going to walk away and say this person is not for me, or I'm going to ask some really good questions to see if I can get to the bottom of what just happened to satisfy me, not him, but to satisfy me. And that's what I mean by learn to move from that experience. So take the experience with you. We don't want to leave it behind. We don't want to say, oh, we're going to heal from that and leave it back there, because in that experience that you had is a whole bunch of information. What hobbies did you give up to be with this person? We hear that question all the time. Who were you before that? Well, part of that experience was, I can guarantee you gave up something. You gave up something because you had to throw yourself into this relationship to try and make it work. So there's a certain amount of honesty. Looking back at that experience, where did you compromise your value system in order to not rock the boat in that experience? So that's what I mean by that. It's not that you learned a lesson, because that sounds so, how can I put it? Patronizing. It sounds like your dad coming at you and saying, so what did you learn from that experience? I want you to take that experience and look at it and hold it and say, okay, I gave up this. I did this. I lied to my friends. Ooh, not going to do that again. You know, what from that experience are you going to change? And that change are you going to bring forward into this new life that you're creating for yourself? Because that's the golden ticket. That is your North Star, so to speak, is in that experience, in that vortex of that horrible experience, are all the things you need to know about yourself that you need to look at and say, wow, I don't want to experience that again. So I need to listen to my intuition. I need to not give up my hobbies or my friends or any of those things that come up not going to happen again. We've all been there, ladies. I've done it. I know that this is quote unquote the norm when we're in a toxic relationship. I was moved far, far away from my family and my friends with, that it was going to be because he was buying this fabulous house and we were going to live there and all of that kind of stuff. Would I let that happen again in that experience? When I look at that experience and I bring it forward, no, not going to move unless I want to, unless it's something we decide together or is for the betterment of our lives. But there's a lot that you can take from that experience. But if you're trying or you're working on healing and you're saying to yourself, I have to look for red flags and I have to understand how I missed the red flags and so on and so forth, that's not what you need to get from that experience. You need to get the stuff about you, the red flags and all of that, because once you know you, and once you create a life that's so big and bold and audacious that you're loving, that you're waking up in the morning and say, this is my life, I'm going out to get it. Nasty people like that can't get in because you have no room. There's no room. You're not even on the same wavelength. You're just not even in the same room together. Because if somebody walked up to you and said, let's say you are now doing painting because you love painting, you're exploring art, you're doing all that stuff, and you've made friends and you're going on a retreat to do art, and you meet some guy and you go out on a date and he says to you, I think that's really stupid going on a retreat and spending all that money. No, that's my retreat. That makes me happy. That's my joy. You're out. I'm in. And that's how it works because you're in such a great place in your life that somebody telling you got to do something different, you're just like, no, no, I love my life. Thank you. And it doesn't work. So that's where you don't have that experience again. You're creating new experiences that bring you joy, and there's just no room for that experience. I hope that made sense.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Absolutely.
Sometimes I get very excited and I get very and I'm part Italian, so it's this all the time.
No,
So
no,
please forgive my hands.
that was great. Of course, life and resonated with uh, experiences that you don't think about when you're in this new relationship, and you think it's going to be exciting. And I was young. I was 17. I was with who I thought was the love of my life. We were pregnant. We were getting married. I was going to have all those things, that white picket fence and all my friends living close by, and all these things that we dream about as young girls. And all of that changed in a heartbeat. And all of a sudden, I barely graduate high school, have this brand new baby girl, trying to figure out how to be a wife and a mother. And I was informed we were moving to another state so that he could go to school for a school he had already contacted, had contracted with, and were already finding us a new place to live. I was nowhere in that conversation. It wasn't something I wanted to do. And he moved me from where I had lived my entire life to Phoenix, Arizona. And I knew no one. I had no friends, no family. In a city that's 2,000 degrees, you couldn't go outside during the day. To being left alone all day with this new baby. And I mean, there was just so many things that were taken away from me. My friends, my family. He would even control what music I listened to in the car. And if he got in the car after I had driven the car and I had changed the radio to country music on the radio, he hit the fan. And it was like, but you think you're in this new life. And at 17 or 18, I didn't know how to get out of it. until luckily for me, he opened that door and I walked through it, baby in tote, and never looked back. But that was one of those experiences that I told myself that will never happen again. Like you said, I am not going to move unless it's my choice and something I want that I'm excited about. I'm not going to continue to do all these things because they want to do them, or and I'm just trying to appease to keep the peace, and I'm not having any joy, but I also didn't know how to communicate that. Like, I didn't have a voice. My voice was crushed pretty young in life.
Mm.
And so I didn't find my own voice until my mid 40s, in that healing time where I was focused on me. And that was one of those things that I really realized that I had lost. I had no voice. I had no way to speak up for myself. I didn't know that I should have wants and needs and desires. And so it was like, oh, I just didn't know because I was so busy in those experiences.
Yes.
But I also didn't, like you said, I didn't look at them as like lessons learned. That's kind of one of those off the cuff comments. Well, lessons learned. I won't do that again. But I think I agree with you in that the term like lessons learned or what did you learn from this is almost a negative.
Yeah, because there's more to it than that. It's the experience, it's the emotional experience, it's the life experience, it's the financial experience. There's so many things wrapped up. There's the friends experience and all of these relationships, these bad relationships we have. So it's not just as simple as saying red flags or any of that stuff. It's the experience that we have to kind of pull it apart. It's like a big wad of wool. And that's the abuse. And you can look at him or the abuser and try to untangle it from that direction, but you won't do it because it's impossible. It's impossible. And you know what? I'm going to be really blunt here. Who cares what he is? Who cares? Who cares if he's a narcissist or a psychopath or any of that stuff? It doesn't matter. You know what matters is you getting on with your life and from that experience unraveling it and saying, well, I'm going to leave that part of that experience back there and not do that ever again. That is not moving forward with me. And in this experience, I'm going to take that part where I was really having a good time listening to country and Western music. And now I'm going to blast it in my car every day, 24/7, because nobody can make it happen. And that's what you want to do, because focusing on the abuser is ultimately not going to help you. And what it's going to do is keep you in a hamster wheel of healing, because you're constantly looking at somebody else. You're not looking at the experience and pulling out the parts of you that were mixed up in that were forgotten about, that were lost in that whole ball of wool. And that's what you want to get to. His character is neither here nor there, really, at the end of the day. And we have so much out there written about what to look for on a first date and all of that kind of stuff. No, no. Mm-mm. Does it make you feel good? Are you happy? Are you quiet? Is your stomach quiet? Is everything the way you want it to be? Are you smiling and feeling joy? Are you feeling happy? That's what you need to know.
Yep.
If you're
Listen to
sitting
that.
there eating, listen to that. If you're sitting there eating dinner with somebody or at the movies and they're making you feel uncomfortable, listen to that.
Yep. You made me giggle there for a second when you were talking about, okay, wouldn't let you listen to country music. Now get out and jam it out as loud as you can. What I did was when I moved back home with my baby, my part of healing was I signed up for country dance lessons.
There you go.
And I went, I am getting me back, something that brings me joy. And I think I have always counted my blessings that I have always been able to do that after coming out of bad relationships, is flipping that script back to finding my joy.
Yep. And that's where your life lives. It lives in there. And one of the things that I want to remind everybody who's listening to this is finding this joy. The best part of doing this is you get to experiment with so many things, like finding gargoyles or going to an art gallery opening or going to the opera and deciding, I really didn't like that. You don't have to do it again. You don't have to say to yourself, well, I'm going to go to the opera, but I got to buy a subscription for 10 years. No, you just have to go and experience something. You might find yourself really liking it and saying, yes, I do want a subscription for 10 years. I really enjoyed that. But unless you get curious and you go out there with an open mind and listening to yourself and say, you know what, that brought me a lot of happiness. So I do watercolor painting. One of the things that I signed up when I was married to him was watercolor painting. Terrible at it. I'm terrible at it. But doing it brings me joy. And like you, one of the first things I did was I got myself a paintbrush and I sat in my furnace room with my little bucket of water and I splashed it around on some paper because it did bring me joy. Looking at what I had done, not so much, but you know, so it's that experimentation. It's all part of finding what you love, what you want more of, and what you want less of in your life. It's really how it happens. There is no magic bullet. It's really up to us to go out and be curious and experience different things. You never know what's going to really make you happy.
Yeah, you don't. You got to get out there and find that for yourself, or remember what brought you joy as a child.
Yeah.
And, that was part of, you and I were talking before we started recording about all the different modalities that are available out there for your healing. But the things that really helped me, other than being educated on what my body was experiencing, because I am very much somebody that loves to throw herself into education, because knowledge to me is power. Like if I can understand it, I can have power over it. Um, but it was finding what brought me joy in my day that was outside of the darkness that I had been living. So for me, that was one, art therapy. Two, I cannot color, paint, none of those things. I am not artistically inclined, but I can color within the lines. And I have amazing coloring books, and I have markers, and I have crayons, and I have colored pencils, and I have watercolors. And I'd tear out pictures and I'd, put it on a thing, and I would do watercolors or regular paint. And it brought me joy. And I can, sit on the floor and turn a cartoon on TV and sit with my favorite stuffed animal and color in my coloring book. And that's what brings me joy. And I also did rope therapy. So I would use rope on mannequins and create outfits. And in my mind, I was planning for these extravagant outings my mannequins were going to go on. And I would catch myself just glowing and giggling in these crazy ideas that were going through my head. Like, Nico's the name of my mannequin. Oh, she's getting all dressed up to go to this event tonight, and she's going to have a wonderful time. And I would pick matching jewelry, and it wasn't me leaving the house, but it was this creativity that blossomed and bloomed in my happy place.
Mm-hmm.
And the more I did that, the more happy I was. And I wasn't focused on how miserable I was because of the brain fog or the memory loss, or thinking about anxiety, because my anxiety wasn't worried about what was going on in the world outside my home. I was focused on getting my mannequin dressed up so she could go out and have a great time, because she didn't have anxiety about what was going on outside the home. It was just finding those things that brought me joy.
I think the greatest way that we can give ourselves joy is to ditch the labels. There are so many labels out there. My mentor, who was the one who told me to go and look at gargoyles, One day I said to her, well, I'm codependent. That was it. I'm codependent. That's my problem. I'm codependent. I got to fix that. I got to find somebody to fix that. Codependent. She looked at me and she said, labels are for laundry. That's the only purpose they have. And I went, well, really? Like, so we got into this conversation and I started to reflect on what I believed I was. I believed I was codependent. I was doing the research rabbit hole, over on YouTube and all of that kind of stuff. And I found this new word called codependency. And a lot of the people who were talking about it, they had childhood abandonment issues and so on and so forth. Then came the inner child. My inner child wasn't healed and so on and so forth. And I did dive into all of that stuff. But what happened was, while I was doing that, Leann, I wasn't living anymore. I was looking for my problems instead of my happiness. Now I live in a place where I'm an unhealed mess. I'm messy. I'm a messy human. There's probably lots of me that is unhealed. But you know what? When I go and I travel or I do something that makes me smile, thrift shopping, which is one of my favorite things to do. And then I like I like repurposing old clothes into new clothes and doing stuff like that. When I'm doing stuff like that, I no longer am focused on whether I need to do another course in how to fix my inner child or whether I'm codependent or whether I have PTSD. I'm not. I'm living my life with a smile on my face and I'm in my happy place, which is what you were talking about. There's a big difference between getting rid of all of that stuff, not going down that rabbit hole or being on that hamster wheel and living, simply living. Because as you're living and you're doing the things that you love to do, as you discover them and you get curious and you do those things, you're no longer thinking about that. You're no longer thinking, oh, was my ex a narcissist? You're no longer doing that. You're no longer Googling for that. You're actually living your life. I think I said this to you earlier before we were recording. And to me, it's one of the most powerful visual analogies that I ever had is that what we're doing right now is a river flowing that we're just sitting there and we're scrolling and we're looking and we're doom scrolling about what is wrong with us. What's wrong with me? What's wrong with him? What do I need to fix? How can I fix it? But over beside us is this other beautiful, pristine river called your life. And it is running right by you while you're sitting there trying to find this solution. The solution is you creating something that you love so much that you're actually living with joy. And just to say this, because I want to put this caveat in, that does not mean you feel happy 24/7, 365 days of the year. I want to put that out there right now because I am not a proponent of just be happy. That doesn't work. You need to have your full spectrum of human emotions. You might have them all in 5 minutes. You might not have any for a week. You might be, fine. Everything is good. But the biggest thing is if you are feeling something, feeling that feeling because it's part of your human mess. It's part of you. And learning that that's who I am. If you're not attacking someone and you're not viciously hurting someone or you're not doing any of that, why can't you be angry for 5 minutes or 10 minutes? I was, how would you put this? I'm going to call it misled because I've been through all my emotions and not the one we were talking about earlier, about another kind of a group of women and they give you speaking opportunities and they do all of that stuff and you have to pay a monthly fee, right? And I had the interview with this woman and she said, oh, you pay this a month and you get to host master classes and book clubs. And if I have a book, so I was interested in that, coffee chats and this and that, and it's promoted on our platform and so on and so forth. So I sent the information to do a master class, and she comes back at me and she says, well, send me the Zoom link that you want to use. And I'm like, but I thought you did it all. Like, why would I give you my Zoom link if you do it all? Oh, no, no, no. If you want that level, you have to pay an extra $50 a month for us to do it. Wait a second. We had this interview. So I've just paid you this much money. Now you're telling me you took all of that money and I literally get nothing for it. So I'm telling you this story because I'm sorry, couldn't just choose happiness at that moment. I had to, in order to process what had happened to me, I had to sit with all of that disappointment, anger, hurt. I felt deceived. I felt all of those things. I had to sit with it, sleep the night, get up in the morning, know that I had to let her know that I was no longer interested in being a member. Please cancel it. And I was very polite and very just, what would you call it? You're to the point,
Matter of fact.
assertive, matter of fact. No blame, no shame, no nothing like that. But if I hadn't processed all of that, if I hadn't taken a moment and said, wow, I'm really angry right now, I need to step away from this for a minute, I may have sent something that would have blown up into a horrible mess. But knowing that you're angry and saying that that's okay for a minute, I need a minute. I need a minute just to do this thing. Please, whoever is listening to this, it's okay to be angry. It's okay to be sad. It's okay to be all of those things. Something happens to you and you sit back and you say, well, I'm grateful for the lesson, or I'm going to choose happiness. You're not doing yourself any favors. You're really not. You need to experience it. And if I had have woken up the next morning and I was still feeling angry, I wouldn't have sent a nasty email, but it would have been something a little bit different. But I have processed it through everything. At the end of it all, the emotion that came out the most was extreme disappointment. How could somebody sit there and mislead at that level? That, again, it was the other person, not me. And once I realized that, it was like, let it go, get on with life. I'm still out some money though, if you know how I can get that back.
Oh no, I kind of have a gut feeling I may know who you're talking about or a program you're talking about. And I'm always grateful to my husband for also being my Jiminy Cricket on my shoulder that will help me think about things and think through them clearly before I make any decisions based on emotions. Because I can easily get sucked into the promise, like you did, of what this can be, and then it's too late. Then you're stuck. So I'm glad that I have my little Jiminy Cricket to kind of help me think about things before I sign anywhere or hand over any money. But I can certainly understand that disappointment and um,
Mhm.
the frustration and all of that. I also want to go back and touch on part of what you were saying about living life versus being hyper focused on the bad, on the negative, on what happened, on being a victim, on, all of those things. Because when I went through my trauma, I was in the beginning, very hyper focused on the memory loss, the brain fog, the anxiety, the depression. And I was like, what are these things? Like, I didn't even know what they were because I had never allowed myself to experience them before. I didn't understand things like my body was holding on to those traumas and now they all decided to come out at one time. But instead of focusing on just how can I fix this? Why did this happen to me? Why am I feeling this? Why, I threw myself into those joy things. I threw myself into the art therapy, into the rope therapy, into uh, doing yoga in my backyard and walking around in my grass barefoot and talking to my plants and digging in my flower beds. And it's almost like having a physical pain. Like all of a sudden, man, I woke up and my shoulder is just killing me. And instead of focusing on that pain, like, oh, I need to get ice and I need to take Advil and I need to do all these things. And the pain stays for days, months, weeks, whatever. And then eventually you wake up one morning and the pain is gone. And you don't even think about it again until something else comes up. And then you think, man, what did I do that made that pain go away? I didn't do anything. I lived my life. And that's what I noticed through my healing is that when I wasn't focused on the bad, when I was focused on what was bringing me joy, like enrolling in school to get my certification as a coach and reminding myself of that experience instead of thinking, oh, I can't do this because I'm broken. I have brain fog. I'm never going to remember anatomy again. I focused on, I've done this before. I went to college in my 30s. And just because now I'm in my 50s doesn't mean I've stopped having the ability to learn. I may just have to change my learning style. And what I realized was I didn't change anything. I still had the exact same learning style, which meant take notes with a pen and paper, write it down, put it into use, do something with that information. And all of a sudden, every day, my old memories are coming back. My anxiety's gone. You know, I was just like, huh, it's because I'm living.
Well, when you think about it logically, Leann, if we sit and we focus on all of these words, all of these things, and it is a rabbit hole. I mean, the internet is so vast now, and there's so much expert opinion and modalities and so on that you can keep going and going and going for days on end. And what you're doing is you're just perpetuating looking for labels that will help you explain something, or you find out, oh, I didn't even realize that. I need to go and check that out. I think that's me. I think that's what it was, or I think that was him, or so on and so forth. You're going to, it's just, it's, well, just picture a hamster wheel. It's just, you go and you go and you go. And I understand we're all looking for validation of our experience. And going down this rabbit hole helps you find that validation. But the true validation comes when you hold the experience in front of you and say, what do I want to take from it? What do I want more of in that experience? Because, you know, even if you were in an abusive relationship, there were good times. And those two things can be true at the same time. There's no doubt of there. There's real bad times and there's good times. So there's good times. So you can even hold those experiences in your hand and say, what did I enjoy the most? How do I want to recreate that in a new relationship? What do I want more of? Do I want that to be bigger? Do I want it to be smaller? Was it great? Whatever it is. And then the bad things. So that experience is what will move you forward. All the rest of it will not move you forward. It holds you back and you are not healing. You're not doing anything. You're literally not doing anything except giving yourself more problems to solve.
Yeah. Yeah, I can agree with that too. Because you can get really hyper focused. And I think I, talked to you before we started about always having one belief that my childhood issues and traumas or whatever were abandonment until I learned the word betrayal. And then I threw myself into that rabbit hole of understanding what betrayal meant and what betrayal looked like and hearing stories of betrayal. It's almost like when you want to buy a new car and you decide on a red car, and then everywhere you see the red car. It's what you where you put your focus.
Mhm.
And I had to learn to validate, accept validation, and say, oh, okay, I think I like the term better, or I feel like it fits me better, the term betrayal than abandonment. But that's not my identity.
No.
Like you said earlier, this is just, that was a season of life. That was a part of my past. That was a part of those experiences, but they are not who I am.
No, I mean, we if we pulled our lives apart and we wanted to go down the rabbit hole, and what I wanted to say, just to add to the experience, your experience is your validation. It happened to you. No,
Love
that's
that.
the validation. So, but if we looked at our lives, Leann, let's be honest. I could probably sit and say, my parents got divorced and it was horrible. I was bullied at school, true story. I was beaten up in high school. I couldn't be a vet because girls were still not allowed to go to veterinary college. If I went through all of the horrible experiences in my life, and let's not forget, I also grew up in the hippie era, so there was lots going on in that era. Lots of things. If I sat with a psychiatrist, I'm sure a psychiatrist could pull me back and put me into childhood regression and tell me all kinds of things that I do in my life related to probably being bullied or my not being part of the cool girls gang, like always being ostracized. I was a wallflower, not invited places. When you think about all those experiences, and all of us have had them in different ways and forms growing up, sure, we could focus on all of those. I could sit back now and say, well, why wasn't I part of the cool girls group? And I bet you I could Google that and find out something that would put me onto something else. And I could really hone in on that part of that experience in my life. So what I'm getting at with this is, yes, you experience an abusive relationship, no doubt about it. That's the experience. Think of all the other experiences you've had in life. Have you actually Googled all of those to see what you need to heal because you weren't part of the cool girls group or you weren't invited to the dance? I'm just being really honest here. We can go down that rabbit hole about any of our experiences in our life, any of them. And the abuse was crappy. I get it. If I could turn my life back around and go backwards, I would prefer to have not had that experience. We could chop it right out of my timeline, but it exists there, just like all the other experiences. But it's not who I am. It's not who I am. The rejection of me in high school, that's not who I am. I don't think about that much now. But it was a horrible, painful time of my life, but I don't think about it, but it's not who I am. But from that experience, I'm I know now what um how can I put this? I know now what is phoniness because from that experience I have pulled out what a whole bunch of phony people they were. So I know to look for real, honest, genuine, authentic people. So what I'm getting at is honing in on any experience to find out how you were at fault or what the person's reasoning for doing that. I mean, I'm sure that I could find reasons why all of the girls in school were bullies. That being said, that's not who you are. Get out there and find out who you are. Live that life and forget about all of that. They were experiences along your timeline. If you look at that, you have all of this timeline left. It's time to get out there and add to it.
I love it.
And I know,
Yeah, because we can
and
stay
you'll be
stuck.
happy.
We can stay stuck in that hamster wheel of trying to unpack every
Hmm,
bad experience in our life and find a way to um, justify it or accept it or whatever. But like you, like I didn't let my childhood experiences dictate my future in certain ways. I didn't, because I grew up the child of an alcoholic, doesn't mean I became an alcoholic. Because I grew up the child of an abuser didn't make me an abuser. And I don't like where people have been so hyper focused on what happened to them that it has become their identity. And they use
correct.
it to justify their behaviors today.
Yes. No, thank you.
Yeah.
And
No,
how
thank you.
often do we hear that? How often do we hear that?
Mm-hmm. Yep. All the time.
No. This is your opportunity to create something that you truly love.
Yeah. And I think that's one of my favorite things that I took with me is I get to. I get
Yes.
I get to change. I get to choose. I get to set my path in my future, in my life going forward. I am no longer attached to somebody else who's dictating the way my river flows, who's throwing boulders in front of me to make my river flow to their whim. I
Mm-hmm.
get to come in with the big machine and move that rock out of the way, and I get to choose the direction my river flows.
Exactly. I love that.
What role, and you touched on this just very briefly, what role does radical honesty play in life redesign, and how does that show up in the work you do with people?
Radical honesty. It's my favorite thing in the whole wide world. Um, if you really want if you really want to live a life that you really love, that you are excited to live, and again, I don't mean every day 365, but a life that you're really enjoying and you're happy and you're all of that stuff. You have to be honest with yourself. You have to be honest about yourself. You have to be honest about your wants, needs, and desires. You have to be honest about your boundaries and when you're going to say no. It's radical honesty across the board. Part of that radical honesty is removing the word should, the should life, as I call it. We get caught up in the should life. So we get honest with ourselves. We say, I hate Christmas. I'm not going to do Christmas anymore. That's radical honesty. I hate Christmas. And I'm just being, it's an easy one. And then your family contacts you. Oh, but you should come. Mom's going to be here. See, what happens? Guilt, shame. The cycle starts. And you back away and you say, oh, just this one more time. Instead of saying, no, I'm not going to come to Christmas. I'm going to celebrate Christmas with mom on another day. I'm not coming. This is where radical honesty comes in. One of the reasons why we don't set boundaries is because we can't be radically honest about ourselves. We can't do those things. We want to do the good girl should thing. So, um, recently I had a birthday and I'm radically honest all the time. And my daughter brought me, we don't really buy gifts, but I like homemade things because that's what I like. And she brought me some tea and this and that she had put together and made me hummus and all of this. One of the jars that she brought me had chocolate covered almonds in it and it had a pretty rim in it and everything. And I said, oh, I don't like almonds. And she said, oh, Mom, I didn't know that. But that radical honesty, she now knows that the next time she buys me chocolate covered, and I gave them to my husband who loves almonds, and everybody shared them, and we all shared them, not me. And that, but instead of saying, I shouldn't rock the boat, or I shouldn't say anything, or I'll just give them to, no, I heard a no. I love what you did. I love all of this stuff, but almonds, they're a dud for me. If we don't tell people what we like, what we don't like, what we want, what we don't want, how we want to interact with them, they don't know. My daughter wouldn't have known I don't like freaking almonds if I hadn't told her I don't like almonds. Right? So we have this presupposition in our head that we want people to treat us a certain way, but we don't say anything about it. How many stories have I heard from women how disappointed they were that their husband didn't bring them flowers on their anniversary? Well, did you tell your husband you would love some flowers for your anniversary? You would love it, and he can surprise you by sending them to the office or to your house or whatever. Just did you tell him that? Because if you don't tell someone, they're not always going to catch on to how that's going to be. We set expectations in our head for other people's behavior, and then we get disappointed when they don't behave that way. It's kind of a thing humans do. And the reason we do that is because we don't want to be radically honest, and we don't want to not do the should thing because we've been so programmed to be should people. And I often say to my clients, are you doing that because you want to, or are you doing it because you're shoulding? Because there's a big difference between wanting to do something and doing it because it's part of your should life. And it's a very big distinction. So, radical honesty is knowing what you like, what you want. You're on your trajectory. You found your North Star, that thing that's going to lead you forward into your life, and you're going to live it big, bold, and blissful. And then you have to do the radical honesty bit. You have to know when you're going to say no, what your boundaries are, what your standards are, all of those things. It's got nothing to do with red flags or other people's behavior. It's all here, right here. Me, 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 me. It's all selfish you. And the only boundary that you need to have is the word no. No, thank you. No, not today. Oh, not now. Maybe another time. That's all you need. That's the only boundary. You don't need these long dissertations about the boundary. If somebody invites you, you can say, no, but thanks for the invitation. You can even say, no, I'm really not into whitewater rafting, but if you're ever going to go to the bar and drink wine, I'll come with you. You can do that, but really the only boundary you need is no. And that's radical honesty. And that radical honesty comes to you when you say, I'm going to say no. I know my wants, needs, and desires. I'm no longer going to do all this should stuff unless you want to. If it's something you want to do, should you visit your great grandmother who's 120? Possibly, you know. But for the most part, our should life is something that has been downloaded onto us. It's just been downloaded and downloaded and downloaded and brings up guilt and shame. And then we think, oh, I'll set a boundary. Oh, no, I can't do that. I should do this. I should do that. Stop. Every time you go to do something and you feel all that guilt, say to yourself, am I feeling this way because I feel I should do something? Because if I'm feeling like I should do something, then ask yourself, do you want to do it? And if the answer is no, pick up the phone and say, no thanks. Great invitation, but no thank you. That's radical honesty. And when you get to that point where you can be honest with yourself and honest with other people, and people actually love it when you're honest with them. It makes it clear for them. It makes it clear for you. There's no hard feelings between each other, no misunderstandings. None of that kind of stuff happens. So that's radical honesty. That's what it is.
I didn't even learn how to do that because that was a learned lesson, a learned skill. um, when I went through that time period of learning to love myself, learning what are my wants, my needs, my desires, and giving myself permission to have that voice that had been taken away from me, and letting go of the guilt and shame that came with setting boundaries, because I had spent a lifetime of shoulds and doing things that I didn't want to do, spending time with people I didn't want to spend time with because I didn't want to hurt their feelings, or I didn't want to hurt somebody else's feelings, but my feelings didn't matter. So, I
Who are
could let,
you anyway in your life?
yeah, I just, and, we live so much in that guilt and shame, and, that we are assuming what other people are thinking. And we're coming up with these, like you said, huge dialogues that are surrounded in that guilt and shame about why we're saying no. So it starts with, oh, I'm sorry, but. And so
Mhm.
that was something that I had to learn to take out of my vocabulary, was starting things with I'm sorry,
Mm.
and just being radically honest about being able to just say no without this long drawn out dialogue about, or making up stories about why I couldn't spend time with this person, or why I wasn't going to go attend their tea party, when tea parties are not something that interests me in the least. But having to come up with these extravagant excuses about why I couldn't go, as opposed to just, like you said, saying thanks, but no thanks.
You know, there's once you start doing it, once you start saying no, once you become radically honest with yourself, it becomes so easy. It becomes second nature. Oh, the first few, I guarantee you're going to be like, oh, I better pick up the phone, apologize, and be all like, oh, just do it. The more you can find that joyous thing you like to do, whether it's painting, reading a book, enjoying a cup of tea, going for a walk, whatever it is, so you can get through because it only lasts for maybe 4 seconds that you feel guilty. I know it feels like a lifetime, but it's really a quick it's an addiction. It's an addiction to your should life. If you can move through that, the next time you say no, it's easier. The next time it's like, no, and so on and so forth. But the one thing that I do want to say before we wrap this all up is consider the owning and embracing the word selfish. We have been programmed in so many ways to believe that anything we do for ourselves is selfish. How could you be so selfish? You're being selfish. I am now to a point where when people say to me, that's really selfish, I'll go, yep, yeah, I own it. It's good. We're good. Because being afraid of that word is one of the things that will stop you from being radically honest, because it's thrown out there every time you say no, or every time you tell someone that, oh, you're not going to your, I don't know, your friend's ballet recital because this art class came up and you want to take it. You're going to pottery class. So many times people will throw out, oh, you're just being selfish. Why wouldn't you support your friend? And what do we feel? We feel guilt and shame. So honestly, to be radically honest, I want to say to everybody who's listening, next time somebody tells you you're selfish, say, yeah, mm-hmm, and smile and move on. Because it's really a projection from them to you of something they would love to be able to do. That's what they're trying to say. Oh, I wish I could do that too. Because most of us don't. Most of us don't embrace selfish. Most of us don't say no. Most of us continue to live this should life. And I want you to embrace selfish. I want you to hold it in your hands and say, yep, I'm good with it.
I love it. I love it. That is so powerful because it is something we have been just ingrained in us.
Yes.
Before we wrap this up, and I know we've been here for a bit, but I don't want to forget to talk about your book.
Okay.
This is such a huge thing. I mean, I think I've started a million books and never finished any, so I'm always so proud of somebody else that has done that has started and completed and is sharing their story, their insight, their feelings, everything with the world. I love the title of your book. I love that I had the opportunity to read it, and thank you so much for sharing it with me. Your book is called Enough: A Woman's Rebellion Against Healing, Narcs, and Labels. Real quick, can you just share a little bit about that book and what it's going to teach people?
Well, it's my conversation with you about leaving behind all of the research and the labels and that are in your way. As you expressed it, I love the idea of the rocks being thrown in front of you, because that's what you're doing to yourself. You're throwing a rock in the way of actually getting on to living your life. So the book is about, I've noticed the internet is, shall we say, oversaturated with opinions and experts and modalities and different ways to do things. I mean, I don't know. I've had so many women come to me and they're telling me all the labels that they've attached to themselves and all the things that they're doing for themselves, and yet they're not living their life. They're still not happy. They're just, and then they're researching more and more. So I wrote this book as a way to say that I give you permission to drop all of that stuff and start to think about yourself as in your humanness and in your experience and what your wants, needs, and desires are, and forget all of that other stuff. It really has no purpose when it comes down to living your big, bold, blissful life. None whatsoever. That's what it's about.
I love it. Thank you for the brief synopsis, but we had already covered so much of what that was, what that means, what people can do to start living their life.
Yes.
So, you know, I really want to thank you again for sharing your story, your fierce compassion with us today, your message that it's never too late to redesign your life from experience. It's a powerful reminder that healing is possible, that joy is not a dream, and that it's right. And we can do this, and we get to, and we can choose. So, for listeners who want a deeper dive, be sure to check out Susan's powerful new book. It's available now. I will include a link in the show notes to learn more about Susan's work and her resources. I will also include a link to her website. Is there any last thing that you want to leave people with, Susan?
Just this one thing. And I know we've talked about a lot today, Leann, but this, you are not what you experienced. You are so much more. You are not broken. Please take that word out of your vocabulary. You're not broken. There's nothing wrong with you. There never was anything wrong with you. What you need to do right now is sit down with a pen and a paper and write down, what do I want more of in my life and what do I want less of in my life? And go from there. It will open up huge opportunities for you. It will open up possibilities. And as my mentor used to say to me all the time, Susan, imagine the possibilities. So that is what I want you to do. Just imagine possibilities when you look at those two questions.
I love it. I think that's probably the best advice I could have asked for you to give to people who are just starting down this road, that have spent years and years investing large sums of money and time and energy into trying to unpack a lifetime as opposed to, like you said, just figuring out what you want less of, what you want more of, and do that and do what brings you joy. And don't worry about what happened in the past. Those are your experiences, but you don't need to carry them into your future in a way that's going to keep you stuck. So
Exactly.
see those possibilities and go after them with courage and compassion and grace and just live life. So, Susan, thank you so much for your time. I really enjoyed this conversation.
Yeah, thank you for having me, Leann. It's been great. Thank you.
Thank you.